Practice day for the Sabres and an opening day for the rest of the NHL. I got some around the NHL notes to get to, some practice updates, including new line combinations, injuries, and then who's going to win an award? If there's a Sabre that's going to win an award this year, who's most likely? I got some odds to get through on that coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. That includes our YouTube channel where you can watch the show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase coming to you on today's show. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 of bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Tuesday edition of today's show, 2 days out from the Buffalo Sabres home opener against the LA Kings on Thursday. We'll have a full preview for you. Before that, talk about the Kings a little bit, what types of matchups, problems that they present, their roster, what it looks like, because the Sabres had a tough matchup in their first two games. The Devils are very good. I do think the Kings are their own type of challenge. So we'll get to that coming up in the coming days on today's show. A lot to get to on today. I got a couple of mailbag questions that I want to get to, some around the NHL notes, practice updates, including a new top line, some injured players. I think those two might be connected, though. More on that. And then I've got some awards odds. Okay, so I've got 5 Sabres are listed for NHL awards on the odds. And I want to get to who I think is most likely and least likely of those listed to win an award, plus somebody that's not listed for an award that I do think has a legitimate shot at it. So all that coming up on today's show. If you want to get in a mailbag question, if you want a comment or a question, news updates, whatever it may be, available to you in our Locked On Sabres text club. If you want to sign up for our text club, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. We'll be on there, of course, minute to minute during the Sabres and Kings game on Thursday night. So a lot to get to, and our mailbag edition of today's show will be from our text line, and a couple of different questions about the roster, kind of some bigger picture questions too. One mailbag question from a listener. To me, Tage Thompson, not a number one center. Is the number one center in the Sabres organization, or will they have to trade for one? So I'm not as definitive that Tage Thompson is not a number one center. We have seen Tage Thompson be a number one center one time. And as I've kind of described it, I feel like we've seen Thompson for 3 years not be an NHL player. Then for 2 years, we saw him be a number two center 3 years ago and then last year. And 2 years ago, we saw him be a number one center when he had 45 goals and 45 assists, or 47 goals and 47 assists, excuse me. So I'm not as definitive that it can't be Thompson. It could be Thompson. Am I sure it will be Thompson? Answer to that question is no. I am not sure that it will be him as a legitimate top-line center in the NHL, one of which you've got almost on every other team in the division. The Lightning have Braden Point. The Maple Leafs have Austin Matthews. The Panthers have Sasha Barkov. These are the big... And then, the Bruins don't have one, but if you want to be a serious Stanley Cup contender, almost every team in the league has that guy. And is Thompson that guy? I don't know. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. This year, maybe we start to see him return to that level. I think they really need him to. Because to answer the question, I wish I could help you. I mean, the volume of prospects, I could answer it that way, between Noah Ostlund, Yuri Kulik, Konsta Helenius. Like, there's a chance someone in the depth chart of the organization has it in them. But if you ask me one by one, is Helenius a number one center in the future? I'd probably guess no. Is Ostlund a number one center in the future? I'd probably guess no. A lot of these guys might have the chops to be a number two center. I definitely don't think Dylan Cousins has it in him at this point. So I think it's a problem. And you want to trade for one, like, good luck. How often do those guys become available? It's happened like 2 times in the last 7 years. John Tavares become available as a free agent like 7 years ago, and Jack Eichel became available for trade. Name me another time. Maybe I'm missing one, but name me another time in the last 7 years that a true number one center became available. It just doesn't really happen. When teams get those guys, they lock them up. They sign them because they're so hard to get. That is why here on the day, it is the 9-year anniversary of Jack Eichel's first game for the Buffalo Sabres. Jack Eichel's first goal for the Buffalo Sabres. A euphoric night. Everyone felt good. They lost that game, right? They lost to Ottawa 2-1. But that specific moment, Eichel scoring, it felt like the birth of a new era. Our true number one center, our Stanley Cup winning center, here he is. And he wasn't that. He wasn't a Stanley Cup winner here. He was in Vegas. He was a number one center. And one hard pill to swallow about losing Eichel over the years and not winning with him here and not having that be a decade-long relationship between the two sides, which winning would have solved. That's it. He didn't even have to be as mature as you wanted. Just winning would have solved it. A playoff berth, a couple of playoff berths, maybe just a good team, a competitive team. He'd probably still be here, in my opinion. And the failure of the previous regimes creating circumstances for Eichel to now be on another team. It's going to take a long time to recover from that. You just don't find those guys. They don't grow on trees. So kind of a defeatist type of argument, I think, on this front, but I wouldn't cross my fingers that anybody else can be that guy if Tage isn't that guy. Your best shot is, to me, Tage is that guy, that he is going to be the number one center, because that might be a 50-50 shot right now. I think he's your best hope. He is your last hope, not your last hope, but he is your best hope, no doubt, for that question. Couple of other things that I want to get to on today's show. NHL stuff. Season open today in North America. In fact, as I'm speaking right now, Kraken and Blues are playing, and that game has been, I'm missing a hell of a second period, because in the second, hockey's back, scoring, we'll see. Do we get some scoring this year? In the second period, 3 goals by the Blues, 2 goals by the Kraken. And then a little bit later on, you're going to have Bruins and Panthers, which is a very good matchup, and then Blackhawks against Utah. Utah's first game at home at Salt Lake City. That's a 10 o'clock puck drop on Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, you got a pretty good slate, too. I mean, Montreal-Toronto was always good. That's a 7 o'clock game. Oilers play against the Jets at 10. That's Jeff Skinner's debut. Skinner, by the way, I read, is having a very sluggish camp so far. And he had been bumped down to the third line, but was bumped back up to the second line with Leon Draisaitl today. So keep an eye on that. Skinner not off to a great training camp start, let's say, with Edmonton. Then you got Colorado and Vegas at 10 o'clock, which is as good as it gets in the West. The best matchup that you can get in the Western Conference. You got some good hockey for the next 2 nights leading into Sabres and Kings on Thursday. The NHL note that I wanted to get to isn't the games. Well, last time I talked about goaltending on this show, kind of on a league-wide spectrum, talking Jeremy Swayman. And I was off on that. A lot of us were thinking Swayman would make it into the year unsigned. He signed. Basically, the 64 plus a couple extra $1 million that Cam Neely talked about is what he signed for. So over $8 million, below 9. Igor Shesterkin. I looked to him in with Swayman, saying, why shouldn't these guys want to be the highest paid goaltenders in the NHL? Swayman's not. He did not reset the market. There's no doubt that Igor Shesterkin is about to, and I applaud him for it, and I'm rooting for him to do it. Because there was a report from Kevin Weeks today of ESPN that Shesterkin was offered 8 years, $11 million per year, which would make him the highest paid goalie in the NHL. And Shesterkin turned it down. How about that? Now, I guess there's an outside chance that he just doesn't want to play for the Rangers, and that could be this, but I wouldn't bet on that. Who doesn't want to play for the Rangers? Star players go to New York to play for the Rangers, not the other way around. So I guess it's money. And $11 million not being enough, again, I'm always rooting for these players to get more money because to me it's just if they're not getting it, then it's just more money in the owners' pockets. So 11 million plus, it sounds like it's going to be above $11 million per year, which is pretty incredible. He's more deserving of it than Swayman. He's got a larger sample size. He's got a better track record of being an elite number one goalie in the NHL. Shesterkin is an amazing goaltender. And I bet the Rangers are going to give him what he wants. What if that's 11.5, 12 million bucks. When we come back, some updates on the Sabres because we've got a lot of injured guys right now and some lineup shuffling, and there's going to be a roster move that comes eventually. So that's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by FanDuel. We're talking some awards odds a little bit later on in today's show. Baseball playoffs, by the way. Love looking at the odds and checking out what I like for the baseball playoffs because I want to get into baseball and the playoffs a little bit more as it's going on here. You got the Mets, you got the Yankees, you got the Dodgers, you got big brands all over the place. You got your small market, spunky teams like the Tigers, and you've got the Guardians. So I want to be invested in. Ben, just looking around, this guy to hit a home run, this guy to, go with a scoreless inning here and a scoreless inning there. I like throwing down a couple of props on the baseball playoffs. It does make it a lot more fun to watch. And, of course, football season. We are into week 6. And NFL fans, you can get this season going on FanDuel with a big return, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view some live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Check it all out over at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, a Tuesday practice for the Buffalo Sabres. I spoke to Lindy Ruff with Jeremy White on our morning show on Tuesday. I did get one other mailbag question that I wanted to address quickly here. Fan listener texted in about how it must be so surreal for me to be able to speak to Lindy Ruff every Tuesday on the show. He said he was also my childhood coach. I couldn't imagine that. And, no doubt. I growing up a huge, diehard, hardcore Sabre fan. I loved Lindy Ruff growing up. Having the chance to talk to him on a weekly basis, it is super cool. It's not the reason why I wanted him back as the head coach, but it is definitely a cool cherry on top for me following and covering this team is getting to talk to Lindy every day. And more than that, eventually the shine will wear off. And maybe that will happen with fans too. That, by the way, this is getting a little sidetracked, but it's a thought I had the other day I want to get in here. It's still super cool that Lindy Ruff is back. There was one argument to be made against bringing Lindy Ruff back as the head coach that I didn't hear anyone make, I think, during the summer. And that is, I don't want Lindy Ruff back as the Sabres head coach because I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to remember him differently. I don't think you would ever tarnish his legacy, but I don't even want to think about that happening for a day or a feeling during a moment, just whatever. Him making a bad coaching decision and being mad at him. I don't want the negative thoughts that come with the Sabres drought being attached to Lindy Ruff. I would get that. I would understand that. Not wanting him fired, right? That won't feel good. If the Sabres are bad this year, and maybe some will feel okay with this, loving Lindy the way I do and a lot of fans do, it's going to feel weird to call for his head, Hopefully we never get to that point. Hopefully it just goes well and they win hockey games. But it'll be a little more awkward. It'll be a little bit more complicated, I think, if they can't win again and Ruff's the head coach. And would they even, I don't want to go down this road. Would they fire him? Would they just, I think someday in the future, there's a mutual, Lindy decides to retire. Even if they were winning, 5 years from now, he's not going to coach forever. So anyways, just a thought I had about Lindy being back. And I hope they win because I want the drought to end. And the Sabres, it's more fun to cover the team and root for the team when they're good. But another reason would be, you don't want Lindy to catch the smoke. I don't want Lindy to catch the smoke, and I'm going to be fair and objective. If Lindy Ruff's making bad coaching decisions and the Sabres are losing hockey games, I am going to be calling out Lindy Ruff. There is no doubt about it. But it ain't going to feel good. I tell you that. It is not going to feel good. So anyways, the question about getting to talk to him, and the listener asked about comparing talking to Lindy to other coaches. And just quickly on that, love talking to Don Granato. Because the best thing I loved about talking to Don Granato is Don Granato was always down to talk puck. He always, whether it was system talk or whether it was, types of players and just the overall state of the game, he would always be down to talk about. Love talking to Granato because he would talk about anything. Anything that was on the table. Lindy, so far, my vibe is he's very much the same way. Today, talking to him about, aggressiveness of goaltenders when talking about Devin Levi, or talking about, types of goals and different ways to score types of goals. Just a lot of cool stuff on that front. Kevin Adams, general managers, typically not the same because they just don't want to give a lot away. I will say Brandon Bean, though, with the Bills is very cool to talk to. And obviously, this shouldn't surprise many, but Sean McDermott is not all of this when interviewing him. You got to be a little bit more on your toes. Let's just say that. So that's a pretty quick synopsis, I would say, of what it's like to interview different coaches and managers. Anyways, by the way, I actually do. Adams is one. I wonder if this will change with him. Maybe not. I think he is outside of the things he can't get into. I think he is more open than he needs to be. I think the team not winning is a reason why. I bet fans might listen to him differently. But Adams is definitely this goes back to even before he was the GM and he was in the business operations and he would come on the air. Adams is a good interview. I just think the GM job more naturally, you got to have more stuff clouded and it can sound like it's more secretive, unless your name's Tim Murray, who just let everything fly and didn't care about the repercussions, which I loved. Anyways, all right, let's get to some practice updates before we run out of time here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. All right, so, and some of this comes from Lindy with us on the morning show. JJ Peterka's got a concussion. Zach Benson's got a lower body injury. Nicholas Aube-Kubel's on IR, and he is going to miss 3 to 6 weeks. So that's a long-term one. Aube-Kubel out for 3 to 6 weeks. So, got to figure out who's going to play that fourth line role. Now, here's what the Sabres had at practice, and here is how I see the lines shaping up for the home opener on Thursday night. On the top line on Tuesday, Peyton Krebs was on the left wing with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch in place of JJ Peterka. The fourth line was just Sam Lafferty and Beck Malenstein. There was no third forward, and they would have to call somebody up, which they haven't done yet. And Zach Benson's out with a lower body injury, so Yuri Kulik was on the second line. Here's how I see practice. Here's how I see the lines and what I think it could mean for Thursday, trying to read between the lines. I think Peyton Krebs' presence on the top line at practice on Tuesday is a sign that JJ Peterka is going to play on Thursday. That's how I see it. Because to me, if Lindy knew that Peterka wasn't going to play on Thursday, Jordan Greenway would be on that line. Because last game, when Peterka left, he put Jordan Greenway on that top line. And it went great. I brought up the numbers last show. It was like 18-5 shot attempts when Greenway was out there. Lindy, in his own mind, his gut, his instinct was to put Greenway up there. And then it worked. He'd have no reason to take Greenway, to me, off that line in his own thinking. So Krebs is up there. Krebs being up there, there's no way Krebs is on the top line Thursday night, right? I can't believe it. I don't believe for a second that Krebs will be up there. So I think that's a sign Peterka plays. Kulik on the second line, I could see being real. And again, you don't have to shuffle the lines around. You let Greenway practice with McLeod and Zucker because that's who you think he's going to play with. That's why you wouldn't move things back and forth. Just let Greenway go down with McLeod and Zucker because that's who he's going to play with on Thursday. Not going to play with Thompson and Tuch. That's my guess. And then Malenstein and Lafferty not having a third forward and not having somebody called up, that might signal to me that Krebs is just going to be on the fourth line. They didn't have a different partner. They didn't call anybody up. my guess, my hunch right now is Peterka goes to the top line, Krebs goes to the fourth line, Kulich stays on the second line, Greenway stays on the third line. That's what I think you're going to get going into Thursday. Now, Aube-Kubel being out 3 to 6 weeks, I liked him. I like him. I like his speed. He had a scoring chance in game one that he probably should have scored, but he got robbed on. As a fourth liner, he's very good. Peyton Krebs is going to be playing out of position. He has not had a good track record of playing on the wing in his NHL career. He has been better as a centerman, and maybe we'll see how this goes. Lafferty can play both. He can play center. He can play wing. I wonder if they start Krebs on the wing, and if it doesn't go well, maybe they shuffle things around. They put Krebs at center. They put Lafferty on the wing. But my guess is that's going to be your fourth line for the foreseeable future. And if either Peterka's not ready to come back, Benson's not ready to come back, and this Krebs first line thing is real, or Krebs struggles on the wing, they want Lafferty at center, so they think, hey, let's call somebody up from Rochester to play on the fourth line. My bet would be that Lucas Rusek is right now on speed dial, that he is either about to get called up or he might wait for one more player to not play well or to get injured. But Rusek would be the guy to me that's on speed dial to jump up in that fourth line while Aube-Kubel is out of the lineup. When we come back, wrapping things up here today on the show with NHL awards. Sabres that are listed on the odds and who I think are actually possible to actually win some awards this year for the Buffalo Sabres. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. With over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more that you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast as the NHL season gets rolling. You've still got some props up for NHL awards when it comes to the odds, and there are some Sabres listed amongst the odds, and we have not had a Buffalo Sabre win an award in a healthy amount of time. If you look at their last major individual award, you had Tyler Myers in 2010. You had Ryan Miller in 2010. And before that, I mean, we're going back to Lindy Ruff winning the Jack Adams Award in 05-06. Who could win an award this year for the first time in almost 15 years? In fact, it would be 15 years to the day whenever that happens at the spring of next year. So there are 5 Sabres listed for major awards coming up this year in the odds. One of which I think is a pipe dream. And then there's another one that's not listed. I'll even start there. The Sabre that is not listed to win an NHL award this year is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to win the Vezina. And I think that's insane that he's not listed. There are 20 plus goaltenders that are listed on the odds that I'm looking at. So that might be one where you could request his odds and get him. But weird to me, he wouldn't automatically be listed. He's a starting goalie that had a great year last year, was in the Vezina conversation in the middle of the year on a team where if they were good, very well could be credited to the goaltender because there isn't like a superstar forward on the team. So Luukkonen is somebody that I do think should be listed, and he is not. When it comes to though some of the other awards this year, Coach of the Year, Lindy Ruff at plus 1,600, And then the Norris, Rasmus Dahlin at plus 1,600 are by far the top two options. And I think that is absolutely appropriate. I think if there is an award winner for the Sabres this year, it is probably one of those two, maybe even both, but both would be a long shot. You could parlay them and probably make a pretty penny. Adams, the Jack Adams Award for Lindy seems right. It's, a guy that was in the running 2 years ago, so almost won it then. Hasn't won it in a long time. 2006 was the last time he won it. And breaking a playoff drought of 13 years. I mean, automatically you're in the conversation if you do that. And as I mentioned, team without a legitimate superstar, very well, like a McDavid level superstar, I think could help him to winning that award. Dahlin to win the Norris, I think he's going to win a Norris in his career. So I like that bet a lot. He is 8th among defensemen to win that award. I think that's fair. There is another Sabre to win the Norris that to me is just no chance. Owen Power is the 16th favorite defenseman to win the Norris at plus 6,600. I mean, plus 6,600 is a long shot. But what's the hypothetical? What is it? I don't see it happening. Power, he's on a team with Dahlin, so they would always take votes away from each other if he were to take that massive step forward. And to me, when you're a Victor Hedman type of defenseman, there are nuances to your game that will take years for the national media to understand and appreciate. The way you win the Norris as a first-timer that breaks out is points. That's how it happens. If you want to be a Norris winner with both your points and also more so your defensive acumen, you got to do it over several years before I think you're getting that award. So Power to me, just no shot, and don't waste any dollar, even if it's plus 6,600. Try another long shot bet. And then there's two Tage Thompson bets. The Hart Trophy at plus 8,000 and then the Rocket at plus 10,000. And actually, I think it's surprising to me that Tage to win the Hart is more likely than Tage to win the Rocket. I would have those flipped. If you ask me what's the better bet there, I would take Tage Thompson to win the Rocket Richard. Because 2 years ago, he was in that running. He was in that chase. He was top 3 in scoring a lot of that year, all the way through, until he kind of slowed down a little bit at the end. Thompson to win the Rocket, I could see that. To him to win the Hart, you need more than just the goals. That's the thing. To win the Rocket, I only need one thing. I just need him to score 1 million goals. To win the Hart, I need him to be great. I need him to score 1 million goals. I need the team to succeed. I need the team to make the playoffs, because Tage Thompson could have 100 points this year. But if the Sabres miss the playoffs, he's not in the Rocket conversation. He could have 120 points this year. And if they miss the playoffs, I bet you he wouldn't win the Rocket. Now, if he had 120 points, they probably would make the playoffs, but you know the point. I think there's more that needs to happen for the Hart. The Rocket, I just need the one thing. I need him to score 50 goals and nobody else to score 50 goals. Matthews, that might be tough. But I think Rocket is the best award there for Tage. I think Dahlin to win the Norris is a good pick. And I think Lindy to win the Jack Adams is a good shot. I'm not sure that one might probably be third to me of the bets, though. All right. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We will preview Sabres and Kings a little bit tomorrow, talk about the Kings, their lineup, and if you got any more mailbag questions you want to throw our way on our Locked On Sabres text line, then you can do that. And if you're not already a member of our text club, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up. Thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. Always appreciate it. Now, go make your next listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.